Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Association of Greater Manchester Authorities Executive Board. Item 1, apologies. We've received them from Councillor Alan Brett, and we have Councillor Sarah Robotham attending for Alan, and from Councillor Richard Lees, also from Joanne Roney, Pam Smith, Stephen Pleasant and Sarah Todd. Item 2, Chair's announcements. There are none. Item 3, declarations of interests. Colleagues know the normal procedure for submitting those. Item 4, minutes of the AGMA Executive Board of the 31st of July. It's to consider those minutes and ask for your approval. Are they approved, colleagues? Thank you. Item 5, which is the substantive item on the agenda today, the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework Timetable. I'll hand over to Mayor Paul Dennett in a moment, but just to say, of course, people will say, why press ahead now? It's an important moment to push on with the plan that's obviously been in development for a number of years now, to give clarity coming out of this crisis with regard to Greater Manchester's intentions, but also to protect the green belt, because if we leave the green belt unprotected with no plan in place, that puts it at greater risk. So it's very important to have a clear timetable, to put a plan in place as soon as possible. This plan allows for every one of the 10 councils in Greater Manchester to debate the plan and agree it. So every councillor, individual councillor, will have a vote, which is important. It is, of course, the third public consultation, if we approve it this morning, that we've undertaken on the GMSF, and the previous two have taken on board concerns and made changes. This timetable that's being considered this morning will allow for a third period of consultation, as I said, and 8 weeks for that consultation, but we'll also put the papers in the public domain for 4 weeks before that. So in effect, 12 weeks for the public to consider this latest draft. So just important context that I wanted to set out at the beginning, and without any further ado, I will invite Mayor Paul Dennett to present the paper. Paul.
Thank you very much, Mayor Burnham. As you've already highlighted, this is to update colleagues on Greater Manchester's plan for homes, jobs and the environment, otherwise known as the GMSF. Obviously, the recommendation before colleagues today is to agree the proposed timetable as outlined in section 6 of the report. Just to remind colleagues, this is a statutory plan which seeks to contribute ultimately to sustainable development within Greater Manchester, delivering our economic, social and environmental ambitions as articulated in the Greater Manchester strategy. This is being prepared as a joint development plan document, and that is to be submitted to the Secretary of State for independent examination, and that is a requirement under section 20 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004, along with any documents prescribed by regulations 22 of the Town and Country Planning, Local Planning England Regulations 2012. The joint DPD has been prepared in accordance with both the Act and also the 2012 regulations. Just to highlight within the section of the report entitled Strategic Context, the spatial plan doesn't sit in isolation from much of the other work we're doing within Greater Manchester. And it is really our strategy to deliver inclusive, sustainable growth. So it sits alongside the ministerial directive around tackling clean air. It sits alongside our local industrial strategy, the infrastructure framework, and also our housing strategy, just to name some of them. Ultimately, our policies and strategies aim to deliver a growing economy that ultimately works for everyone within Greater Manchester. Also to reduce inequalities, reduce carbon emissions, deliver on our ambitions around carbon neutrality by 2038, deliver net zero carbon homes by 2025. 28, and colleagues will appreciate within the spatial framework we are committed to a 50,000 affordable homes target, 30,000 of which over the period of the plan will need to be for social rent. And I say that at a time when I know we're all acutely aware of the housing and homelessness crisis we are facing now within Greater Manchester, with over 100,000 households on our housing waiting list, with 30,000 of those in priority need, and obviously our ongoing anxieties around the evictions ban being lifted on the 20th of September, which will potentially further exacerbate all the challenges we're facing here within Greater Manchester to tackle the housing and homelessness crisis. Also, this strategy is a tool to enable us all, if you like, to deliver our local housing need target, which, as colleagues will appreciate, is a target set by central government that we as a Greater Manchester system need to deliver. And it allows us to work across local authority boundaries to actually benefit from urban density at the core, and also within our townships across Greater Manchester to protect, to the best of our abilities, the green belt and green land of great utility, if you like, to residents within Greater Manchester. And I think importantly for me, the plan is also important to decide on where development takes place within Greater Manchester and to avoid planning by appeal. And I'm only acutely aware of the issues around planning by appeal. We've had a scheme in the city of Salford recently, which has been appealed 3 times, costing the local authority a fortune. But thankfully, the Court of Appeal recently found in our favour. And I know other colleagues across the conurbation obviously deal with similar challenges when it comes to development. I also think it's important that we set the GMSF within an economic context. Obviously, we know Brexit is on the horizon. We've got the comprehensive spending review coming up. Government have told us they want to publish an infrastructure strategy. There's the white paper on devolution and local recovery. But when you look at some of the economic indicators nationally, I think they point to the absolute necessity of us actually having clarity of vision for our future in Greater Manchester. In the first half of this year, gross domestic product fell by 22.1%. Paid employees within the labour market fell by 730,000 between March and July. Furlough, as we all know, comes to an end at the end of October, and that's been supporting 9.6 million people within the economy. The Resolution Foundation have recently suggested that 4 million people still depend on the furlough arrangements nationally. The Office of Budget Responsibility has also forecast that unemployment will rise to 11.9% by the final quarter of this year. The Bank of England is a little bit more optimistic, talking about a 7.5% unemployment rate. But we also know that young people left school and university this year, 800,000 of them. And the Resolution Foundation is also suggesting that youth unemployment could rise by 640,000 this year, taking it over 1 million. I highlight some of this data and some of this national statistics really just to highlight the absolute importance of making progress with our spatial plan in tandem with all the other strategies and documents that Greater Manchester has been working on over recent years. I also think it's important to note that government have been clear that they're still committed to delivering 300,000 homes per year by the mid-2020s. And they've also informed us that COVID-19 is not a reason to delay the progressing of statutory plans, and also it's not a reason for planning panels or committees to not take decisions on developments in local authorities. Government ultimately sees development as a key part of our recovery from COVID-19, and colleagues will probably be aware the Prime Minister addressed the nation back in June with his Build, Build, Build talk, where he talks of obviously planning reforms, and we're all aware now we have a white paper, high street revival, a cross-government strategy on kind of public land, what we've commonly referred to as one public estate, £12 billion to build affordable housing, a first homes pilot, and importantly for Greater Manchester, the 400 million Brownfield land fund, which we've been successful with 81.1 million of, to enable us to progress the Brownfield preference approach and obviously tackle some of those tricky issues around viability. Also, just to update colleagues, we have submitted our further submission for the remaining 10% of that fund that's still available at a national level. The deadline for that was actually on Sunday of last week. Also, government have announced 900 million Getting Building Fund, and you'll be aware we were successful in downloading 54 million for shovel-ready initiatives. And also, government want to support SMEs, along with 2 billion Green Homes Grant and 1 billion energy efficiency of public sector buildings. All of this is important because it demonstrates a commitment somewhat to starting, if you like, to level up by ensuring that capital is available for places like Greater Manchester and the North. As Mayor Burnham's already highlighted, this is a 8-week consultation starting in early November. AGMA Executive Board will be meeting week commencing the 12th of October. I know in the report at 6.6 it says meeting on the 12th of October, but I just want to confirm that it is week commencing the 12th of October to recommend the plan to Greater Manchester local authorities for formal approval. The evidence base has already been highlighted by Mayor Burnham, will be in the public domain 4 weeks prior to that. So in total, this will be, in a sense, a 12-week consultation, although we won't be able to receive submissions until early November when that 8-week period kicks in. Then following that, cabinets and executives are required to agree the publication of the plan for consultation, and full councils will need to meet, and colleagues will know we've committed to doing that within Greater Manchester, to agree the submission of the plan to the Secretary of State. That'll be in either October or November of this year. Following that, we'll then publish a post-consultation report late 2020, and then we'll look to submit to the Secretary of State in June of 2021. Section 7 in the report also highlights some of the risks to the timetable around resources and consultants, the need potentially for further dialogue, also working with our local authority outbreak management plans during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then Section 8 talks about how we will consult within a COVID-19 compliant world. Again, that's concerned with how the districts operationalise their local authority statement of community involvement, how we engage with online methods of engagement, and reasonable steps to engage sections of our communities that ultimately don't have internet access. Ultimately, we want to maximise engagement with the draft GMSF. As you know, previously we consulted back in 2019 between January and March, and we received 17,000 responses, which is absolutely fantastic. And prior to that, we've also consulted on this back in 2016. So those are the recommendations before colleagues. As I highlighted at the start, this is just to approve the proposed timetable as outlined in Section 6 of the report, but I thought it was quite useful probably to give colleagues some context about the importance of doing this at this point in time. So the recommendations are before you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. An extremely clear explanation of the position that we're in and the proposed way ahead. So thank you again for all of your diligent work on this. Colleagues, would anybody like to raise any points or put any questions to Paul?
Chair, if I might.
Brenda Warrington?
Yes, thank you very much. I think, thank you, Paul. That was an excellent summary of a very important document that we have before us. And my question at the moment is simply, you mentioned it towards the end of your presentation, reference to the impact on consultation, particularly looking at the situation we're in at the moment in Greater Manchester with the pandemic and the rise in infection rates and possibly more restrictions, let's say, on movements, etc. You know, it's looking to me that we may be in a situation where only kind of online type of consultation is going to be reasonably possible, but there will be a situation where people may not be able to access that. Do we have at the moment any thoughts on that? Because we may not be able to open town halls, libraries, etc., you know, for people to view documents and things. So, you know, just initial thoughts at the moment. I know it's a bit of a stretch, you know, looking so far in advance really at the consultation, but I think we do need to be thinking about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. It's an important point. Paul?
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Councillor Warrington. As is highlighted in the report 8.4, we have started to think about this specifically with reference to people who may not have internet access. And as you rightly highlight, all of this has to be done in line with our local authority outbreak management plans at a district level. So we have been thinking about this. Obviously, we need to be flexible in terms of moving forward. But as you'll see in there, we do talk about virtual exhibitions, digital consultations, video conferencing, social media, online chat functions. And then for those without internet access, we specifically talk about, you know, telephony. We talk about nominating advocates to share views on people's behalf, especially for vulnerable members of our communities, using existing networks, targeting those most affected by the proposals as well in terms of any land allocations that will be made. But you're absolutely right to highlight we need to continue to think about this in light of obviously the situation we're facing with regards to increased community transmission of COVID-19 across Greater Manchester and the country. Thanks, Councillor Warrington.
You're on mute, Andy.
Still on mute, Andy.
Andy, you're on mute.
I don't know what's going on here. You hear me now?
Yeah.
Thanks to you both for what was an important exchange. And what I would say, Brenda, is I think we're going to have to keep a close eye on this issue, aren't we? Because as you said, we don't know what necessarily lies ahead in the next few months. What we do know is, on the one hand, we've got to make progress with the GMSF, but we have to give a voice to all of our residents as well. And how we do that, we might need to be creative and think of new ways of allowing that. So you've raised a really important point, and I'm grateful to you for doing that. So, colleagues, were there any other comments or questions to Paul? If not, can I refer you then to particularly section 6 that Paul took us through and the proposed timeline there. And can I ask for your approval for the timetable as set out for the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework? Is that approved?
Agreed.
Thank you very much, colleagues. So that concludes our business for this meeting of the AGMA Executive Board. Thank you very much for your attendance, everybody.
Thank you.
Meeting closed.